We're going to switch gears and talk about Montana's energy landscape. And then we'll be hearing from Montana's Secretary of State, Christy Jacobson, this afternoon, as well as a panel from the Montana Manufacturing Association. So lots to look forward to before our 3 hours of happy hour tonight from 6 to 9 p.m. So I have to give Stacy Dorrington some credit here. I learned something in my MC script. Apparently, Montana ranks 11th amongst the states for total energy consumed per capita. But think about our temperature extremes from the last 2 weeks. I think we swung 60 or 80 degrees in some locations within a matter of 1 week. So our temperature extremes and small population contribute to the state's residential sector having the second highest per capita energy consumption of any state, behind only North Dakota. We're also rich in fossil fuels and renewable resources, having the nation's largest recoverable coal reserves, about 30%. It's safe to say that energy and energy policy are critical to Montanans. So we'd like to welcome Consumer Energy Alliance consultant Megan Marino-Thacker to the stage for an address on Montana's state of energy. Megan?
All right. Well, Happy New Year. I'm excited to start 2023 off with all of you here in Montana. And on what an important issue. You know, energy is the resource that warms our homes, keeps the lights on at work, fuels our pickups and trucks on the road, powers our combines, and like was just stated, you know, this past 2 weeks in the country has really taught us how important reliable power is. So, as was stated, I'm Megan Thacker, and I work for HBW Resources, which is a national government and public affairs firm. And one of our bigger clients is the Consumer Energy Alliance, and which I'm here to speak on their behalf today. I'm going to run through just a brief overview of the organization. Consumer Energy Alliance is an advocacy organization that supports reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy for everyone. You know, we're all energy consumers, whether it's at the gas pump or paying your utility bill every month. Energy policies and the prices that result are really important to all American households. Consumer Energy Alliance wants to make sure that energy policy is being thought of as a crucial issue on every ballot, and CEA works with our consumer members to ensure that their representatives are considering their energy needs of their constituents. CEA has over 550,000 individual members, as well as close to 400 affiliate member organizations that we help navigate energy issues. We're based throughout the United States and represent members in almost every region, including Alaska. So these are some topics that are on the minds of some of our members. Of course, first off, high energy prices and other issues going on in the energy system. You know, there's a major transition going on, which I'll get into in a little bit. There's a focus on low carbon fuels, reducing your carbon footprint. There's been massive investments authorized recently in Congress for renewable energy. So implementation both of those investments. There's a major tax credit that's now in play for carbon capture. So really deployment of all of those issues and how they impact consumers are some of the issues that CEA focuses on. And CEA conducts several campaigns aimed at increasing energy awareness and promoting sound energy policies for our consumer members. And this is a sampling here. They're in almost 22 states, and you'll see here that CEA advocates on behalf of all sources of energy, whether it's wind, solar, hydropower, natural gas, and of course carbon reduction, carbon capture, pipeline infrastructure. The main theme being that any changes to the energy system need to be affordable and reliable for energy consumers. And there's a lot of focus on the environmental justice issue under this administration, which I'll get into here in a little bit. CEA likes to talk about energy justice, which is the goal of achieving social and economic equity throughout the energy system. And these high energy prices really do impact lower and mid-income households the most. So it's very important to keep the price on consumers in mind. So before I get into looking ahead it's important to look at where we are now and where we've been, right? It's the new year, and this is what we do in the beginning of a new year. So if I had to characterize the year 2022 in any one phrase, it would be that we've seen a major disruption to our energy system. We started off the year on a trajectory of increasing energy prices that had been increasing from the previous year, starting in January 2021 about. On February 23rd, Russia invaded Ukraine, and we saw a huge spike in energy prices, and that invasion, of course, has completely altered the way Europe and Asia think about meeting their energy demands, and it's really opened some opportunities for U.S. exports, which I know are important to this state. And we're also in the midst of a major energy policy and political shift here in the U.S. and also globally. We started off the year in January 2021. President Biden took action to halt oil and gas lease sales. And when 22 rolled around, we had yet to see any real meaningful lease sales getting going again. And I'll get into that issue a little bit later, but that's just one example of the abrupt shift that's been occurring in our domestic energy policy. And moving forward, there'll be even more focus, I think, on carbon reduction, on accelerating renewable energy. And there's some opportunities here for Montana, which I'll get into in a little bit as well. In 2022, we saw record gas prices. As I mentioned, we began the year on the upward trajectory that started in January 2021 and rose sharply in March. In March, we saw crude oil prices surging to $123 per barrel, which is the highest price in 14 years. And then in May of 2022, we saw historic gasoline prices at $5 per gallon. Natural gas prices rose to $8.14, which is the highest price since early 2007. And the Energy Information Administration projects that energy prices are going to stay high this year in 2023 throughout the year. And you'll see here in the graph, while they've dropped significantly recently from March, they're going to stay above the annual average. In 2022 also crystallized for us the impact of energy costs to American households. There was a recent Fox News op-ed published in November of 2022 that talked about how Americans now are choosing between food and fuel. And there's just 2 points that I think bear repeating here. More than 20 million American households, 1 in 6 American homes, are struggling to meet their home energy bills. The collective amount owed for energy bills in 2022 has doubled since the end of 2019. So energy costs really are impacting all American households now, and especially those lower income households that we really do need to keep in mind. And the impact on diesel is even more pronounced, right? The price of diesel is now above $4.50 a gallon, is projected to stay that way throughout 2023. And this is the issue that impacts, I think, the business community the most, right? The price of diesel really does impact every single facet of the supply chain. So it's an issue that is really top of mind for businesses. A recent survey found that 63% of small business owners said that inflation was more damaging to their business than COVID-19. And what's driving this sentiment? Higher electricity costs, higher shipping costs, rent hikes, labor shortages, supply chain issues, elevated interest rates. All of these are in part caused by energy costs, right? And with these higher operating costs, businesses are forced to accept lower profits, pass on those operating costs to your customers, although there's many industries that can't always do that. And so you need to absorb those costs and cut those jobs or just close your doors. And energy costs are really top issues for businesses of all sizes. There was a recent survey done by your parent organization, the U.S. Chamber, so many of you may have participated in this survey, but the top 2 issues of concern for you guys are the cost of goods and supplies, and the cost of utilities and fuel. So again, energy is very top of mind, no matter the size, from 1 to 5 employees, 5 to 19 employees, 20 to 500 employees. And the impact of energy costs to agriculture is also very pronounced. And I want to spend some time on this slide because I know how important agriculture is to the state. The graphic here demonstrates just how much energy is required for certain farming operations. Gas and diesel are used to power machinery. Electricity powers irrigation systems. Natural gas for heating structures and drying grain. Natural gas is also an important feedstock for fertilizer. The ag sector accounts for almost 5% of total U.S. end-use energy consumption, and it's 15% of operating costs for U.S. farms. The USDA recently determined that high energy prices result in lower agriculture production due to the decrease in planting, which in turn impact market prices. For the livestock industry, that's higher feed costs, which also in turn lead to higher market prices. U.S. farms and ranches, they sell their commodities according to market prices, so they can't always pass those costs onto the consumer, and they're absorbed by the family farm. So how does Montana fit in? And these facts were repeated in the introduction, and bear repeating again here again. These facts come from the Energy Information Administration, and the point I want to make here is that Montana really does have a competitive advantage when it comes to energy policy, or meeting its energy needs, rather. You have a reliable baseload power, a multiple of choices for that baseload power being coal, hydropower, natural gas. And so as opposed to other states in your region, right, who are enacting legislation to ban certain uses of energy. So Montana, again, has the nation's largest coal reserves, and it produces 5% of U.S. coal production. And I'm glad the point was made in the introduction about Montana being the second highest per capita in energy usage of any state. And I think that's really important to note, because you'll be seeing some real transition of your energy system here in the state, which I'll get to in a little bit. And it's important to keep this in mind, that you guys do face those extreme temperatures, that keeping the system reliable is really important. And it really depends on how that mix is done, how that build out occurs, if it occurs in the right way. So wanted to double down on this point. And I also want to share about this point is Montana, you guys have a growing economy. So your small commercial load and your residential load are likely to increase, right? So this point is going to become even more pronounced. And Montana also has the largest underground natural gas storage site. This is a bar graph that just overviews where Montana sources its energy. Many of you likely are well aware of this bar graph, but you'll see here that Montana relies on coal, hydropower, and natural gas for most of its sources of generation. And again, your loads are really expected to increase, right, due to your growing economy. So the University of Montana Bureau of Business and Economic Research recently discussed a study on electricity reliability initiative at a recent Public Service Commission meeting, I think. So some of you may have seen these statistics, but there's a few top statistics that I think are a very good overview of a very good snapshot of where Montana is meeting its energy needs. First off, Montana spends less money on electricity than consumers in other states. More frequent but shorter power disruptions, and as someone from Louisiana who often experiences power outages for up to 2 weeks after a major hurricane, I understand how very real and disruptive these systems can be, or power disruptions can be. So the faster the lights go back on, the better for your household, for your place of business, for everyone. And so I think Montana's in a good place as far as having the shorter power disruptions there. And Montana energy sales have also been increasing sharply since 2020. Baseload power plants are decreasing in capacity, part of which is coal strip, and but still carry the heavy load in those high demand times. And notably for this region, there are 7,000 megawatts of power that are due to retire in the Northwest region. And a lot of it is the coal-fired generation. And so again, you have a lot of transition that's upcoming in the next 2 years, and it's very important to keep in mind that the source of the power is very reliable and affordable. I stole this graph here from Northwestern Energy's website last week, and I think it's a good demonstration of the diversity of Montana's power generation. And so you'll see here the thermal energy, which is the coal and the natural gas, carried a lot of the load and very stably. The other observation I made after I saw this graph was also just how much wind generation contributed to meeting the state's energy needs, and I think that's progress. So Montana energy opportunities are really emerging due to both a shift both in your capacity generation due to neighboring states, passing punitive legislation on energy source, but also due to the shift in energy policy here in the U.S. and globally. And there's some real opportunities that are there for Montana and that are going on. So I just wanted to flag a few of those, the top ones. Clearwater Wind Project at 750 megawatts from NextEra. It's one of the largest wind projects in the U.S. and very significant, is now online. And the Montana Sun Project at 80 megawatts in Yellowstone County. Northwestern has announced it's building a new natural gas plant in Laurel. And there's also opportunities in Montana to take advantage of the new federal incentives on low carbon fuel. So carbon capture and sequestration and enhanced oil recovery, which has been occurring in southeast Montana. Renewable fuels, Calumet Refinery just recently announced conversion to renewable fuels with Montana Renewables. And Montana has a big role to play also in the development, the deployment, the transportation of hydrogen, which is also a burgeoning economy here in the U.S. and across the pond in Asia. There's a growing demand for that, and so Montana has the ability to carry some of the load in its pipelines, and it's recently entered into an agreement to be a hydrogen hub with North Dakota, Minnesota, and Wisconsin, and that's basically a program newly authorized from the Department of Energy that enables the state to be eligible for some significant federal funding, which really do help with those private investments. And spending a little bit more time on carbon capture here, and I'll get into it more later, but this is a real exciting opportunity for the energy industry right now, and so I want to spend some time here. So the International Energy Agency estimates that carbon capture can abate 90 to 99% of emissions from industrial facilities, and you need 3 magic ingredients, basically. Point source emitters, which the state has about 8 sites that I think are 45Q eligible. Pore space, which is subsurface geological pore space 1,000 to 2,000 feet below the ground, the same type of rock that has stored fossil fuels in the ground for multi-millennia is also capable of permanently storing the CO2 there too. And you need pipeline infrastructure, which Montana also has. So that's a real opportunity for your state and one to watch moving forward. So what's going on with our energy policy? Why are we seeing all of these new types of energy coming online? Why is there some transitioning of baseload capacity transitioning out? Well, there's been clearly a major shift in U.S. energy policy and also in the world, which I'll get to after these domestic slides. But when President Biden was elected, he rejoined the Paris Climate Accord, which meant the U.S. now adopts greenhouse gas emissions targets of 50 to 52% reduction by 2030, reaching 100% carbon pollution-free electricity by 2035, achieving net zero emissions economy by 2050, delivering 40% of the benefits from federal investment in climate and clean energy to disadvantaged communities. And this is the President's Environmental Justice Initiative, or Justice 40, which I really want to underscore as well. Every single meeting that we have with EPA officials, interior officials, you name it, environmental justice comes up. It's a high priority of this administration, and it's a part of the calculation when agencies are considering approval of permits. And importantly, environmental justice also means actual dollars to local communities. So whether that's a child care center, in a rural area, or where the project is located, money for the school, a economic development program. Those are some of the examples that we're helping companies put together when they apply for those permits. The president also took some bold actions to accelerate renewable energy, utilizing the Defense Production Act for clean energy technology and critical minerals, which is beneficial to the domestic mining industry here. And he's also authorized historic investments for renewable energy and carbon reduction in the massive bills that have become law, bipartisan infrastructure deal, and the Inflation Reduction Act. At the same time, he's embraced a different approach to fossil fuels. As I mentioned, in early 2021, the administration paused new oil and gas leasing, onshore and offshore. And this has a real impact, not only in prices, but really on the whole economic chain of energy. And there's been some talk of the existing leases that are out there, only a portion are producing. So I want to talk a little bit about why lease sales are important to really consumers. And when companies look at lease sales, you're planning your capital investments multiple years out. They're multi-million-dollar capital investments that you're planning, and in the case of offshore, it's multiple hundreds of millions of dollars that take to put these plans into action, and so that requires decades of planning, and so that's why the energy business industry really does need to rely on certainty in the leasing program. This translates to jobs in local communities. It's commercial contracts that are being signed to service the pipelines, the infrastructure, the vessels offshore, and importantly the geologists to make sure you need the lease, right, to survey the resource. And so that's why it's important, I think, to really the whole energy system. So Congress stepped in recently in the Inflation Reduction Act and mandated offshore leasing to resume, and so we're seeing some of that get started again. We've only really seen one series of BLM lease sales, and so that's still an issue for the onshore. And of course, the president revoked the Keystone Pipeline, which I know is a really big deal here in Montana. And there's also been, again, a focus on increased scrutiny on permits, on energy regulations. So this is a different approach. And when you take this approach to this source of energy, this is the source of energy that most of the world relies on heavily to meet its energy needs, right? So once you impact this one source of energy, then you kind of flip the laws of supply and demand, right? You signal less production, both in the near term and in the far term, and so it does have an impact on prices. This is why you see some administrations, announcing releases from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve when prices are high, and so it really does have an impact, and it really needs to be kept in mind, the impact to energy consumers. So the shift in global energy policy really also began earlier than 2021. There's this headline made some waves when the French government famously blocked a U.S. LNG deal due to its carbon footprint. So there has been a growing interest in carbon reduction around the world, right? And that is impacting industries here. Soon after, I think also what happened in late 2020 is the major energy companies started to announce net zero energy goals, right, in order to compete in the global market. So it's become the price of doing business in the energy industry. And with the Russian invasion in Ukraine, of course, there's now also a shift away from Russian gas, blowing open the market for other imports to Europe and Asia, which is huge opportunity for Western states. There's a growing public opinion here in the U.S. even on the value of reducing your emissions, and of course there's a federal incentive incentives and mandates like SEC guidance related to ESG and those types of requirements that have had a real impact as well. And of course, the environmental justice point too is again becoming a real thing, and I think will be a high priority this year in 2023 and in 2024 for this administration to get that done before they're out. And again, at the same time, I think I just made this point, but the world is still relying on fossil fuels to meet its energy needs, but notably, partially due to domestic and global policies, renewables are the fastest growing. So what can we do about it? Your decision makers matter. And so let's review, the 2022 midterm elections. So think November of 2022 went a lot like November of 2020, right? Voters ended up behaving very similarly as from the presidential election. There was not this big red wave that a lot of political analysts had originally predicted. The House went from a 5-seat Democrat majority to a 9-seat Republican majority. The Senate went from a 50-50 Democrat Senate to 51 to 49, picking up a seat in the Senate there. And margins, so we have a Republican-controlled House and a Democrat-controlled Senate. Margins, however, are still relatively thin. There are a significant number of moderate Republicans and also moderate Democrats, which I'll get into in a little bit, that may be able to work across the aisle to get some good policy done. But however, working on the Hill for 12 years, my outlook is that it's likely going to stay very polarized, and especially in a presidential year, as rhetoric increases. So the other reality we're dealing with right now is that the 2024 presidential cycle is also underway. And so as soon after the election in November, President Trump announced his candidacy, and which of course set a lot of news, a flurry of news and opinions about that. There's several other, and I have up here several of the candidates rumored to be considering a 2024 run. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis being the front runner, Ambassador Nikki Haley, Vice President Mike Pence, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, Virginia Governor Youngkin, and also Maryland Governor Larry Hogan. There's also rumors Senator Ted Cruz may still be considering. So as these candidates start mobilizing their campaigns, and as we get closer to 2024, there'll be a lot more rhetoric, I think, from both sides of the aisle. There's going to be a lot of positioning done on issues, I think, including energy, because energy prices are going to stay high, right? And so there's going to be a lot of gridlock on the federal level. And looking at the 2024 Senate cycle, there will also be an increase also in rhetoric to some degree on this issue. And Republicans may have an opportunity to flip the Senate in the next cycle, because Republicans are defending less seats in red states, and Democrats are defending states where there's Democrats in relatively moderate states, conservative states like here in Montana and elsewhere. The point I want to make about this slide is that the senators in cycle are Senator Joe, some key races that I think will turn into key races, right, this year and next, are Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, Senator Kristen Sinema from Arizona, Senator Jackie Rosen from Nevada, Senator Sherrod Brown from Ohio, Senator Tester from here, of course, Senator Casey from Pennsylvania, and Senator Baldwin from Wisconsin. The issue that all of these senators have, all of these states have in common, is that they're heavy energy states. So I think the energy issue is really relevant to this discussion. And I think decision makers really need to keep in mind the transition that's happening in some of these states, including here, and the opportunities and the importance of keeping the energy system reliable. So with gridlock on the federal level, we're seeing an increase in activism on the state and local level. So recently there have been states that have passed natural gas bans: Washington, California, Massachusetts. Others, and some states have passed bans or phase-outs of natural gas. Other states have been more proactive of adopting legislation to ensure natural gas stays in the mix, right? I want to flag this for you because of the transitioning going on in Montana, I really think getting ahead of this, getting ahead of any effort to ban natural gas is really important, right? Because you're going to need to have that option when your system transitions. Consumer Energy Alliance has been heavily involved in some of these efforts, and this is an example of some of the reports that they've done. $25,600 per household in New York due to the natural gas ban. The other issue that we're seeing an increase in local and state activism is carbon capture. CEA has been tracking this since 2021. There's opposition began in the Midwest in November of 2021. In Nebraska, top 8 reasons to oppose risky carbon pipelines. Even the Sierra Club has launched an effort in 2021 in Louisiana to try to block carbon capture efforts. And want to flag this because a lot of the opposition is occurring in some conservative rural areas where there's been some misinformation spread and honestly unanswered questions. Industry hasn't necessarily been as forthcoming and very as proactive as needed to answer these questions that are around carbon capture. So just to spend some time very briefly on this, because just in case it comes up in Montana, carbon capture and sequestration uses processes that have been in industrial use since 1972 through processes like enhanced oil recovery and natural gas processing facilities. What is new is that the economic incentive hasn't really been there until now. So with the bipartisan infrastructure deal passing, the $10 billion for carbon capture, $8 billion for hydrogen, which is the related infrastructure, and the expansion of 45Q, it's really a live ball now. So I really can't underestimate the opportunity here for industry on carbon capture and the importance of it, the effectiveness of it, not only to reduce carbon emissions, but also to protect those good paying jobs at those industrial facilities that have been around for many generations, and as a lot of those industrial facilities are under pressure to reduce their emissions. So this is a really good tool to keep those businesses around. So what does 2023 look like, and what can we expect? So the President Biden's team is going to be focused on finishing some legacy items, and one of those is environmental justice. And so want to flag that, and we really do see that happening, and it may be sued in the courts, after 2024. But since there's money associated with it, since there's going to be dollars on the ground, so I really do see this issue lasting for the long term. And of course, he's also very focused on implementing the infrastructure funding. So with 2024 presidential cycle, we'll see rhetoric become more pronounced, and public opinion will grow as their influence of public opinion will grow as we get closer to the elections. So that means decisions like the BLM methane rule, carbon capture regulations, whether it's the tax credit guidelines or the pipeline guidance for onshore and offshore carbon capture, that's going to become more vulnerable to public scrutiny. And with gridlock in Congress, we'll also see an increase in activism on the local and state level. So all this, meanwhile, we're seeing a massive transition in the energy system, and gas prices are going to stay high. So the main point is that there's going to be some major changes to the energy system over the next 2 years, and it's going to be heavily influenced by domestic and international decision makers. So that means that the business community really does need to get involved to become advocates for your energy liabilities and start talking about the importance of baseload energy power, reliable, diverse energy power. We all like low carbon emissions. We also need to make sure it doesn't lead to blackouts, right? And so that, I think, is the main point I wanted to share. And I think that Montana really does have a lot to offer, that you have a lot of advantage compared to other states in the region. and you have a lot of opportunity as your energy system transitions in the next few years. And please consider me as a resource. The Montana Chamber is now an affiliate member, so please consider me as a resource on energy issues. I'm happy to help the Chamber and you all navigate these issues moving forward. And with that, I'm really thrilled to have had this opportunity to speak to you all. You may have seen in my bio, but I worked in the delegation for 8 years handling energy policy, and it's really a joy to come back home. And I care a lot about the state, want it to continue to succeed. So please, consider me as a resource and a friend. So thank you. The source generation?
Yeah.
Okay. Sure.
Your support of thank you. Your support of natural gas is certainly helpful to us. One thing I'd point out here is, you have fossil fuel. There's coal. Certainly, coal strip's been helpful to us. Our hydro system's a fantastic renewable resource. And you're right. When the wind's blowing, it's a really good form of electricity. It's very inexpensive. But this chart shows. And I hope that's Christmas week you're showing right there.
It is December 21st through the 28th.
Those 2 days where the wind is not blowing, we had to import a significant amount of power from outside the state. And if we had our natural gas plant that we're building in Laurel, we would have saved customers millions. And so the reason it's important to show that slide is the need for fossil fuel resources. And I think people forget that the United States, 40% of your energy is delivered by natural gas. And so this slide is really helpful. I'm a panelist tomorrow. I wish I could have that slide for tomorrow, but it's very, very helpful. And all of the above mix is important. I think you mentioned that today, and we really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Thanks for your presentation. Matthew Adams from NTEC. Just a couple of things to throw in as far as facts and get your thoughts on. One of the things you didn't mention was the relationship to energy and national security. As we look at this chart, and let's leave this up here for a second because I'm going to reference to it. Right now, the U.S. coal fleet is about 200 million gigawatts. 50% of that is scheduled to expire between now and 2030. There are 400 gigawatts currently under construction in China and India, and they will continue to open up one plant every 11 days between now and the end of 2029, just coal plants. As we dilute the base power in the United States, and as China, who in my personal opinion is our biggest foreign adversary, continues to increase their military and continues to put themselves in a place where they will not have any lack of access to power, that feels like a concern. I wanted to see if you guys had looked in on that at all. Second, on that chart you showed that coal is covering about, I'm guessing 25 to 30% of base for Montana. Mm-hmm. Right now, real time, in the middle 30 of the United States, it's 45% what's coming through. A lot of that is Powder River Basin coal. Powder River Basin coal is something we should be very proud of. The quality, the way that it's mined, the level of safety. Right now, according to financial statements filed with the SEC, there's right about 12 to 18 years of proven and probable coal reserves in the Powder River Basin, which in reality means there's probably 7 to 12 years of actual coal that's sitting there. We're also sitting in a permitting environment where if I would go apply, if somehow I had $500 million of profits to go after more coal right now, it would take between 8 and 12 years before I would be able to take the first ounce of coal out of that new lease. Mm-hmm. So let me just say those things again. We have between 7 and 12 years of coal left in the Powder River Basin, and to get more coal takes 8 to 12 years. So there's a gap of coal being gone, not because of policy, but because it's not economically available, and it's just not physically available. So the permitting side of natural resources is massive on this end. But I want to come back to you, and it's just, how do you view, or have you viewed in your conversations, the national security aspects of reliability on our grid.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the invasion of Russia really crystallized that for everybody in the world, the importance of energy to energy security. It really means lives, right? It's so this is a very important issue, and I came back to this slide because of the point you talked about of China, building that many coal plants, and I forgot to mention there's a point on here talking about there'll be a 28% increase in consumption, and this is driven largely by consumption in Asia, in China and India specifically, and those are heavy coal consumers, and so there's a huge opportunity there for your lower sulfur Powder River Basin coal, and then again there's a huge opportunity for domestic LNG and other sources. So if we don't get it right here in the U.S., these other countries are gonna do it for us, and they don't have the high environmental standards that we have here. So it's a very important issue, and I can't underscore it enough. It's Europe is rethinking how they meet their energy needs. So Germany, I think, had 19% renewables generation, and they were, everyone had very aggressive targets to accelerate their renewable development. I think that's really important, and they also heavily relied on Russian natural gas, so they're really rethinking, what their energy mix is looking like. And I know Japan is the head of G7 summit this year, and they are announcing some really aggressive emissions targets, but really some aggressive goals about stockpiling base load forms of energy like natural gas and coal because of what's happening in Russia. So it's really important, and I'm glad you asked the question because that needed to be said again. So thanks. All right, I think that's it.